Well, hi, Val. It's John Klingborg here. Heard you were retiring, and I wanted to thank you for all that you've done. So, as I retire at the end of a busy and rewarding day at the veterinary hospital, I always like to grab my pipe and a good book. And my favorite book to read at the end of a long day is A Caring Profession, the story of veterinary medicine in California, also known as the CVMA History Book. As I look through this book, I'm reminded of your predecessor, Dick Sugarmacher, or Sugar as we used to call him when we didn't think he could hear us. But it was published before you became executive director of CVMA. And so there could be a whole new history book written with all of your deeds and all of the things that you have accomplished on behalf of the pets and the owners and the profession. So let's just relax, stretch that tie out a little bit, or what George Bishop calls putting on his pajamas. And let's talk about some of the things that you've accomplished at the helm of CVMA. We're going to speak mostly about things that happened during your first year at CVMA. And I had a chance to have firsthand knowledge of that because I was president while you were starting your first year as executive director. The very first issue we dealt with was microchipping, and a company was implanting microchips in animals with an international frequency standard that could not be read by most of the United States scanners. And so animals were getting lost and they weren't being returned to their homes. And we pushed for a national conversation and for there to be one scanner that read all frequencies, a universal scanner. And that is commonplace now. There was a company called Genetic Savings and Clone. If you remember, pet cloning was a big topic. And for $50,000, that company would clone your cat. Now that cat, the clone, may look different than the original cat, but rest assured that it was the same. It's genetics, it's complicated. We had a lot of legislation that we were dealing with back in 2004, but right off the bat, we were dealing with all kinds of animal welfare and animal rights legislation. Those were hot topics back in those days. And the very first issue we dealt with was ear cropping. We actually faced ear cropping and the banning of ear cropping in dogs in 2004 at the end of a legislative session, and then in 2005 at the beginning. We took a controversial stand in voting to ban ear cropping, which was not a commonplace thought process in the veterinary profession, but we were out there, you as executive director, and we lost, unfortunately, twice, but it's the thought that counts. Laying hens and the practice of what's called forced molting or induced molting. And for the first time in decades, the conversation of banning forced molting actually prevailed, and that practice was banned at the AVMA level. CVMA, again, with you in charge, led the process. And then we had a little dust up with West Hollywood, a lawsuit and counter lawsuit and stuff. Bottom line is that an animal rights group did release your personal email and my email addresses as well as our fax numbers. And we received a lot of interesting email and faxes for a year or more on that issue. If we look at the kinds of issues, they happened at the city, county, and state level, replacing the word owner with guardian, ear cropping, GMO legislation, which would have banned certain vaccines for animals, the claw issue, and then spay and neuter happening at both city, county, and state. And you had to be aware of all of what was going on across the whole state and make sure that we didn't get into trouble. And speaking of trouble, occasionally CVMA puts you at the table with some pretty nefarious characters. Now, we appreciate that you sat at the table and we didn't. But what we know is if you're not at the table, you could be on the plate. So thank you, Val, for sitting at the table with these folks over here. And you have received many awards across the years, more President's Awards than anybody who's ever walked the earth. A thank you for your hard work and dedication as a CVMA president, looks back on their year and wants to thank the one person that helped them the most. You've also received the Association of Veterinary Medical Executives Outstanding Achievement Award, and that is truly the award among your peers. You have guided the CVMA into the next century. We're past the 125-year mark, and your dedication and your vocal advocacy for the profession and for animals has been acknowledged, has been recognized, and we thank you so much for it. So Val, from me and many other colleagues that share in the joy of what you've accomplished, we want to thank you for everything you've done on behalf of a caring profession.